All right, coming up right now is part 2 with my interview with Dr. David Luchins. This is It Prophecy on IsraelNationalRadio.com. Again, email is messiahhour@gmail.com. Again, speaking with Dr. David Luchins here on Is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio. I want to know if you can also give an assessment of President Obama's relationship with Israel and Netanyahu, because at times it's been very frosty, and also if he should do more to try to keep Iran at bay, because Netanyahu has come on over and over and over saying Iran's building a nuclear bomb and the U.S. or someone has to stop them. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that from...
Okay, two great questions. Question one. In February of 1991, at the height of right after the Persian Gulf War, when there was the loan guarantee crisis, it was March, between Jim Baker and Israel, I was with Senator Moynihan in Yitzhak Shamir's office. Foreign Minister, Finance Minister Peres was there, Foreign Minister Iran, the whole group. And Yitzhak Shamir turns to Moynihan and says, "My friend, when will you run for president?" And Senator Moynihan says, "I can't run for president. My wife is Catholic. She will leave me. I will not be able to divorce her." Everyone laughs. And then Shamir says, "It's very good that you can't run for president." And Moynihan says, "Why?" He says, "Because you are our friend. You are a good friend of mine, a good friend of Israel's. And the President of the United States can't be a good friend of the Prime Minister of Israel, because the first job of the Prime Minister of Israel is to say no to the President of the United States." And Renz nodded yes, and Peres nodded yes, and everyone agreed. If you look through the history, every President of the United States has demanded things of Israel that Israel has been very pained by. Whether it was Reagan with the AWACS. You remember Reagan's slogan? "Reagan or Begin," he told senators, including mine. If it was Reagan recognizing the PLO, Reagan tearing up the agreement to share secrets, Reagan saving Arafat, whether it was Bill Clinton squeezing and pressuring Rabin to make concession after concession, whether it was George W. Bush helping to demanding through Condi Rice that every last Israeli soldier go out of Gaza, read her autobiography, or whether it was Obama demanding that Israel be allowed Qatari supplies to rebuild Gaza, which turned into tunnels. Israel has to say no to presidents of the United States, whatever they are, of either party. I kind of like a little frosty relationship in the relationship. I don't want the President of the United States to be able to demand things of his good friend, as George W. Bush demanded that his good friend, Ehud Olmert, allow Hamas to run the Palestinian elections. I don't like that. I actually, as an American Jew, want Israel to be a little independent of the United States now and then. We have to stand up to the president. And there's no question that when the chips are down, President Obama's come through for Israel, come through for Jews time after time. Whether it was saving Israelis in the Egyptian embassy, whether it was the Iron Dome. On the other hand, Iran's a marvelous example. There's some tension there, some disagreement there. But President Obama has built on and continued George W. Bush's policies. And I hope they're doing a lot of things we don't know about. We hear about the assassinations. We hear about the accidents. We hear about the cyber warfare. I'd like to believe my country's doing a lot more to keep the Iranians swarming. And I'd like to believe they will continue to do so. And I think talking about it makes it very counterproductive, doesn't it?
I suppose. I mean, that's one of the things we want to get you on it, because this is a huge topic in Israel, and I think there is a confusion of what exactly President Obama is doing or not doing, et cetera. And also, there seems to be, I've noticed more hatred in the Jewish community towards, I think, this president than any other president. And I wonder if you can comment why that is, because, like you said, you had different presidents, like President Reagan, doing things that were not so pro-Israel. And
I think they're different. I think you have to differentiate between Israel and the United States here. President Obama's approval rating among the Jewish community in the United States is 15 points higher than among other whites. That's pretty good. In Israel, there are a number of factors. One major factor, is that there's a free newspaper in Israel called Yisrael Hayom, given out, printed by a man named Sheldon Adelson, who pays for it, who is devoted his last 10 years of his life to discrediting and destroying Barack Obama. That publication is given out in the Orthodox community. I was in Israel 4 years ago, showing a publication given out for free in the Haredi community. The headline was, "Obama Neged HaYeshivot." Oh my gosh, what do you do now? You open it up. Obama wants higher taxes on the rich. The rich support our yeshivas, therefore Obama's against the yeshivas. Now, come on, cut it out. The guy was elected, he had a 3% approval rating in Israel. 3% approval rating. I think Mohammed Abbas had a higher approval rating. If anything, he's increased it. I think that Obama started out a tremendous service and a tremendous loss in Israel. I mean, listen, his middle name doesn't help. I don't think his pigmentation helps entirely. He's different. He's other. And I think some of his rhetoric didn't help. I think his rhetoric was extremely foolish on his part. And it hurt him. On the other hand, he's been as good a friend, if not better, than his predecessors. He hasn't pushed Israel out of Gaza. He hasn't demanded that Israel make unilateral concessions to Syria. He hasn't torn up secret agreements to share secrets with Israel. He hasn't. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think he's done less damage than most of his predecessors did. He didn't hold back aid unilaterally the way George Herbert Walker Bush did. He has not referred to this Rova as a settlement the way Bush did, and they all were good friends of Israel. They all were good presidents.
Now,
even though I voted against a few of them.
Right, of course. Now, one more last question about President Obama. There was a movie made a few years ago said, I believe it's called Obama's America 2014 by Sousa, and I was also thinking to myself, I don't recall, I know there was Fahrenheit 9/11 where you had a whole movie that criticized the president. I mean, outside of that, I don't really recall another movie like that. It just seems, I guess, Well,
we live in an era of specialized media. We live in an era, once upon a time, all of America listened to Walter Cronkite and they went to sleep.
Right.
Now you have, if you're a liberal, don't listen to certain. If you're a liberal, don't listen to certain. I try to listen to both and read both.
Right.
I was speaking to someone, and I said to them, there was a Wall Street Journal editorial, and they said, well, if you read the Wall Street Journal, they said, no, we have nothing to talk about. That's unhealthy.
Right.
It's unhealthy. It's bad for our community. We're 1.7% of the population of the United States, and we can't afford these things. We can't afford the situation where a major tzedakah in the state of New Jersey, just a couple of months ago, had a dinner, and they invited the governors are Republican, and the two senators are Democrats. And I won't say who's who, but one of those sides said, if the other party's there, we're not coming. Why should our yeshivas have to choose between the two political parties? Everyone should be supporting us. It's unhealthy.
Wow.
I'll tell you one more thing on what you mentioned. May I tell another story?
Sure, go ahead.
In 1991, shortly before we got to Israel, Senator and Mrs. Moynihan were in Morocco, and they were dining with His Majesty, the King of Morocco. And the King is carrying on about how much he loves the Jewish people. And Mrs. Moynihan says, and how come you're still officially at war with Israel? Why don't you recognize that? He said, Madame, I am a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him. I am a proud Muslim and Arab leader. If I am drowning, you throw me a life preserver. And on the life preserver there's a label that says Made in Israel. I am duty-bound as a Muslim and an Arab to reject that life preserver and proudly drown. Did you really do that? No, ma'am. On reflection, I would tear off the label and keep the life preserver. If we want the Arab support for the sanctions against Iran, if we want the Arab support for the war against the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda and Hamas, we're all the same. They're all part of the Muslim Brotherhood mentality. If we want the Arab support, then we can't give the impression that America's marching in lockstep with Israel. We got to let the Arab leadership, whether it's Sisi in Egypt, whether it's the King of Saudi Arabia, whether it's the government, whether it's the Gulf states, who are all now being very supportive of things that Israel and America need. We give them the breathing space of tearing off the label and keeping the life preserver.
Wow. Again, Dr. Dave Luchins here on Israel National Radio, Root Sheva. The show Is It Prophecy. Let's switch gears and talk directly about the terrible terrorist attack last week in Har Nof. And I think one of the things that was a bit different, I don't know if it's the right, respectful way to say it, but this was not in a quote-unquote settlement. This was not in some place that you imagine that was a war zone. Har Nof, people don't know, very suburban area, very much like America. If they say that Israel is a second language in Har Nof because it's very American. I want to get your comments on if American Jews should do anything about this, if they could, or if they should not, because a lot of people want to do something and they're not sure how to go about it. And I'm even curious, I mean, it's a Jewish country, but there's other problems people have in America they have to deal with.
I'm a Talmud of the Soloveitchik brothers, Rav Yeshiver and Rav Aaron Zachron Bracha. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik used to say, you can pay or pray for your side in Eretz Israel, but don't get involved in internal Israeli politics here in America in a way that might hurt Israel. I I think that Israel needs, I trust the state. Thank God we have Medina Israel. Chazei Hashem. I think that Israel's doing everything it can to protect its people. I think it's not easy. And I'm not going to sit here in America and fight to the life of the last Israeli. And I'm not going to make statements telling Israel how they should protect their people and I shouldn't protect them. There's no question that there's ugly incitement going on. There's no question that there are people who are inciting people, telling them outrageous things, and sending them out there to kill or be killed. You can't protect against. You can't protect against somebody who is an Israeli, has his rights to walk around Israel, who suddenly one day decides, because he hears something horrible on the radio, he has to go out and kill someone. It's unspeakable. It's terrible. And I think it was Naftali Bennett who pointed out that the vast majority of Israeli Arabs are loyal to Israel. We shouldn't demonize. We shouldn't generalize. I think that the most important thing American Jews can do, of course, is to, as I said, as Rav Soloveitchik said, to pay and to pray, to support unstintingly Tzedakot and and the government of Israel financially and in our tefillot. And here in America, to use our political influence to make sure that every step and measure is taken to help Israel. It's not a small thing. I mean, it's not a given. There's both on the left of the Democratic Party and the right of the Republican Party, there's a growing sense of isolationism, a growing sense that we don't need to have sides in this war, in this struggle. It's a cycle of violence going on for 1,000 years. It's not our struggle. And we have to work very carefully in groups like AIPAC and groups like the JCPA and groups that take over young congressmen and legislatures. Israel, these are so important. We can't let go, and we have to build support because it's more tenuous than we realize. It's not a given.
Now, also, I wonder if you can comment on the media coverage in the United States in particular, because we in Israel saw the video on YouTube of what CNN reported, CNN calling it a mosque, obviously incorrect, it was a synagogue, and some reports saying in headlines, 5 people killed, policemen killed, the end, and not saying anything about terrorism. So I wonder if you can comment a bit about the media's perception in the United States of what happened here in Israel.
Again, people are very unhappy with the New York Times. The New York Times article was so sensitive, so beautiful, so moving that I read it to my class at the college, and girls were crying. And they said, "Where's that from?" Is it the New York Times? I said, "Oh, I don't read the New York Times. It's terrible." So again, it depends. Jody Ruderman, the New York Times bureau chief, who I don't always agree with, wrote a beautiful thing about men in prayer, Rosenthal and Fillin. That's the lead story in the New York Times. Very beautifully written. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, other media start out with other points of view, and you're absolutely right. The initial reports were very garbled, and in some cases, no apologies were made for them. In some parts, they don't. 2 Palestinians killed by Israeli security forces was, I think they had the first BBC story. So the answer is yes. The media starts out with the bias or the chip, but some of it goes back to Horace Greeley, the famous newspaper editor, was once asked, "What do you put on the front page?" He says, "When a dog bites a man, it's not news. When a man bites a dog, it's news." And so, Baruch Hashem, we have a certain reputation for probity and for integrity and for being reasonably mentioned, so that when our enemies act the way our enemies often act, it's not newsworthy. But if one Jew acts that way, it's a terrible Chillul Hashem, and it is newsworthy. So you have to be very careful. But the most important thing we can do in our personal lives is be with Hashem Shemayim, to act in a way that reflects well on Jews and on the Jewish state, and in a way that we can get support. That sounds like platitudes. Those are meaningful and important platitudes. They make a difference.
And I think even politicians in Israel realize that more. You saw during the war in the summer, Prime Minister Netanyahu go on Meet the Press and basically thanking the United States citizens for paying for the Iron Dome. So is this something that more Israeli politicians are understanding, that they've got to show a good side to the United States, to its people, since they're getting $3 billion from the United States?
It's crucial. It's more than that. It's crucial to explain. As Pat Moynihan once said, and he was completely right, Senator Moynihan said, the Israelis must always present their case that they and America are on the same page, doing the same thing, defending freedom and democracy in a very difficult part of the world. Israel is carrying America's water. It was Jimmy Reston in the New York Times, one of the most famous columns ever written on Israel, a very, very beautiful pro-column during the 1967 war. He started the column by saying, "The Israelis have the courage of America's convictions." Or as Elie Wiesel said during the Zionism and racism fight, Israel is a metaphor for democracy. It's a those who are attacking Israel precisely because it represents a certain type of Western democracy which they detest and they hate, and is a surrogate for all they hate in the world and resent in the world. And we have to remember that. And if the American people understand that, then overwhelmingly black and white, Democrat and Republicans, liberal and conservatives, they support Israel. That has been damaged in the past few years, partially by the media, partly by the fact that the certain segments of the community have seized upon as though they own Israel. They're the only ones that can speak for Israel. And that's a mistake. Israel doesn't just belong to one wing of one political party. It belongs to the entire American people because it's America's closest friend in the world. And that has to be the message we put out.
And do you see that as long as the message is out there that America will continue to support Israel? Jay Leno had a great joke. He was in Israel 6 months ago saying that America and Israel have a bond, and we know it's unbreakable because President Obama's trying to break it. I just throwing a joke. This is a Jay Leno joke. But meaning something of, could that bond be broken if Israel does not present its case well enough and the American people say, we don't want to pay tax dollars for an Iron Dome halfway across the world, we're not interested. So that's where I'm concerned. Could something
I'd rather not speak the unspeakable. If the day comes where Americans in growing numbers do not see Israel as a surrogate for American values, do not see it as an outpost of the values we share and believe in, that day comes, it will become increasingly difficult to maintain American support for Israel. The day comes Israel is seen as a partisan political football. Democrats love her, Republicans hate her, or vice versa. That day comes will be very bad for the state of Israel. The minute, no one in the United States has political debates. No one tells Irish Americans, vote Democrat, they're better for the Irish.
Right.
But as Steve Friedman, the former head of AIPAC, said, every 4 years we prove the anti-Semites wrong. The anti-Semites think we're all smart. Every 4 years of election time, we fall for it every time. The partisan pandering. Israel transcends political parties. It's more important than either party. It transcends the differences of the moment. I always find this a litmus test. Let's conclude with this little litmus test. I only know one person in the whole world, maybe there's two, I only know one, who would have voted for Obama for other reasons, but didn't vote for him because of Israel. I only know one person in the whole world, maybe there's another one, who would have voted for Romney, but didn't vote for him because of Israel. Israel is usually an excuse, not a reason. Usually you pick the candidate you like for 1,000 reasons, then you say, oh, he or she is better for Israel. I have a close friend. I asked her how she's voting in the Connecticut Senate race. She said, I'm voting for X. X is better for Israel. I said, how do you know that? She said, oh, because X belongs to my political party. Therefore, X is better for Israel.
Right. Yeah, that's not always logical. All right. This has been a big honor. I really, really appreciate the time. I know you're very busy. I wanted to know, anyone out there listening, if they want to see when you're speaking next or anything that you've written about that you want people to read, any promotions, anything you want to plug, we'd be more happy to have you do that on this program.
Well, thank you. And I have, if anyone goes on the Aish audio, to give a plug for Aish, they have about 50 of my shiurim there on the tape. You can always listen to them. And if anyone wants to email me, I'll be happy to get emails. Try not to be too angry. Dr. Luchins at AOL.com. And thank you very much for this privilege and pleasure.
Absolutely.
Have a good job.
It was our privilege. Yeah, be safe, and thank you so much for your wise words on the program, and all the best to you and family, and have a happy Thanksgiving the rest of the day.
Thank you. Take care.
Amazing. Be well. All right, that concludes today's episode of Is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio. Today's episode has been Senior Vice President of the Orthodox Union and former advisor to Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Dr. David Luchins. And this is a fantastic show. Look for it on YouTube as well as JApp. You can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com, and you can support this program and future episodes by going to PayPal and typing in IsraelSportsRadio@yahoo.com and making a donation. Even a donation of high $18 or too high $36 is helpful. Every little bit helps. Every little bit is greatly appreciated. So that is today's episode. Stay tuned for tomorrow's program, which will air at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States, at 7 in the morning on the West Coast. This is It Prophecy on IsraelNationalRadio.com. God bless and have a good day.